What is going on, guys? It's Dwarf here. Welcome back to another speculation video, another rumor mill video on the PS4 for new PS4 jailbreaks. Obviously, there's still a lot of ETA when questions building up in the comments, so I thought I'd do another video just covering some of the latest rumors, giving you guys my take on it. Obviously, take everything with the appropriate grains of salt because, again, I don't have any kind of inside knowledge on when new jailbreaks will be released for the PS4. This is just my own take on things. And I just want to cover some of the new rumors that have come out that I didn't cover before for various different reasons that I'll get into right here. So just to recap things for anybody who is new to PS4 jailbreaking and wants to know how these things tend to happen, how jailbreaks get disclosed, Sony has this bug bounty program on HackerOne where security researchers, hackers, whatever you want to call them, can essentially report vulnerabilities in the PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5 to Sony through HackerOne, and they can receive bounties from Sony. So Sony will give them some money for the report, and Sony will then patch the vulnerability. And if the security researcher wants to have that vulnerability disclosed publicly, they can request that, and Sony more or less will oblige in most scenarios. A lot of people wonder why on earth would Sony, allow a jailbreak to be disclosed? It's mainly because it kind of looks bad on them if they don't, because obviously if there's some kind of vulnerability in something like, FreeBSD, the FreeBSD version that the PlayStation uses, then there's other companies out there that will be using that same version of FreeBSD that will also be vulnerable. And if that information is made public, then they can fix that issue in their systems. And, that vulnerability is out there publicly so that, all of these companies can fix that vulnerability and make their systems more secure. Whereas if PlayStation refuses to disclose that information, then obviously all these systems out there can still remain vulnerable. It's kind of expected of them to oblige and disclose that information once they have, had time to actually patch it in their own systems first and let everybody update to the new firmware, to the patched firmware, which then prevents people from exploiting that vulnerability on the PS4 or PS5. And then they can go ahead and make that information public now that it's basically fixed for most of the people who have PS4s and PS5s, because they will have updated to that new firmware by now. And for the people like us who wait behind on older firmwares, we can then take advantage of that exploit once it gets disclosed, which is essentially what's been happening over the past few months. So of course, we got the 6.72/7.02 exploit and the 7.55 exploit from this because a security researcher called The Flow went ahead and reported a bug to Sony twice. This first one here, this use after free, he received a $10,000 bounty for it, and he requested disclosure of the vulnerability to Sony. And then after a few months, about 3 months or so, Sony disclosed that information publicly once they had patched it. And then we were able to take advantage of that jailbreak. Slayers Gorvy and Spectre Dev worked on creating an actual jailbreak with that information. And then we have the second one, which was 8 months ago, which resulted in the 7.55 jailbreak. Again, The Flow reported it to Sony, this vulnerability. He received the $10,000 bounty. And after that, it got disclosed about 5 months later, or 5.5 months later. It was disclosed publicly, although it was disclosed in a limited capacity, which essentially meant that not all of the information was shared, just that there was a vulnerability in this particular section of the kernel. And, it took a bit longer for people like Spectre Dev and Slayers Gorvy to work out a jailbreak because they were working with limited information, but they were able to do it and we were able to get a jailbreak. So we haven't had a jailbreak since then. Now, what we have had is we've had one report from Null Pointer. And the thing about this is that he received a $10,000 bounty, and that is essentially the going rate for a kernel exploit, it seems. Because in both scenarios where The Flow reported a kernel exploit to Sony, something that could result in a jailbreak for the PS4, he always seems to receive exactly $10,000 for it. And we have also got an exact $10,000 bounty given to Null Pointer. However, for whatever reason, Null Pointer has said that this will not be disclosed. It was reported 4 months ago, and again, The Flow's reports were not disclosed for about 3 to 5 months. So it's still within the window of, could it be disclosed? Maybe. But I'm not really counting on this being disclosed, especially since Null Pointer has stated publicly that it will not be disclosed. So, we'll wait and see, but it's unlikely. So the other piece of information that I haven't covered yet, which is still quite a bit of old information at this point, but is that we also have CTERT, or CTERT. I'm just going to call him CTERT. Anyway, so he has gone ahead and posted a tweet publicly saying that he just heard from PlayStation that he's been awarded a $10,000 bounty. And obviously $10,000 bounty insinuates it's a kernel exploit for the PS4. The thing about this, this is quite old at this point, as you can see, 19th of August. The reason I didn't cover this is that it's a bit strange because it doesn't show up in HackerOne. It's not in here, and some people are saying, well, it's not in here because it's not being disclosed. But Null Pointer's one isn't being disclosed either, but the report still shows up. So I'm not gonna lie, it is suspicious that it's not showing up in here. However, obviously there's people thinking, is it fake? Is this some kind of out of season April Fool's joke, right? But I don't know. I don't think so, because obviously CTERT is a pretty trusted member of the whole PS4 jailbreaking scene. In fact, he was the one who released the first proper public jailbreak for the PS4, the 1.76 jailbreak, which, as you can see here, is an exploit that he released. That was way before this whole bug bounty program existed, so there was no incentive to report it to Sony, so he just released it publicly. So, I do believe him in this case. I don't think it's fake. I think he's telling the truth. It's just a bit strange that it's not showing up on HackerOne. Also, he tweeted an update yesterday that says, they're also sending me a PS5 console, which is great because I don't actually have one yet. Thanks again to PlayStation security team. So obviously they're sending him a PS5 so that he can do security research on the PS5, just like he's done with the PS4, to try and uncover bugs and vulnerabilities in the PS5. So that's interesting. I also wonder if he is communicating with Sony directly outside of the HackerOne bug bounty program, which would be why it's not showing up in here, because he's just communicating with Sony directly, which is possible. So, or PlayStation really, it's the PlayStation team that he's communicating with. There's a few things that kind of worry me about the way things are going with this whole HackerOne bug bounty program, because I'm feeling like Sony is really, or PlayStation is really trying to, suppress the release of these exploits or of this disclosure. They do not want disclosure to happen, in my opinion. Obviously, it looks bad on them, like I said, for them not to, accept a request for disclosure once they've patched the vulnerability, because obviously if it's public, other systems can, other companies that use that same system can find that vulnerability when it's public and patch it in their own systems and make everything more secure. It makes more sense. The problem is that obviously I don't think PlayStation are very happy that these disclosures are resulting in jailbreaks for their PS4s, because if you think about it, the first time that this happened with the Flow, he requested disclosure and he got full disclosure, fully disclosed the vulnerability. And that resulted in a jailbreak pretty quickly. The second time he reported it to Sony, it was only disclosed in a limited capacity. Now, sure, the Flow might have requested that it only be disclosed in a limited capacity, or more likely it was Sony basically saying, yeah, we're not going to give you full disclosure of this. We're only going to disclose it in a limited capacity, just to kind of mention where this kind of vulnerability is, but not, give the whole full write-up on how to actually exploit that vulnerability. And therefore, it took longer for us to get a jailbreak from it, but it still happened. So, it wasn't successful in completely preventing a jailbreak. So then you have Null Pointer, who basically says this is not going to be disclosed at all, whatever it is. And then you have sort of CTERT potentially communicating with Sony outside of the HackerOne system, which, in which case they could have him sign some kind of NDA or something, where it's like, hey, if you want to get a bounty from us, then none of the information you share with us can be made public ever, and it will not be disclosed because it's behind closed doors between him and Sony, whereas HackerOne kind of has its own sort of system in place for researchers to request disclosure and for that to be honored in most cases. So Yeah, it does kind of concern me a little bit. Are we going to actually start seeing this kind of bounty program going behind closed doors, and then none of this information ever being made public, which does concern me a little bit. So we'll have to wait and see with this, though. It's very early days. You know, again, the 19th of August is when he said he got the bounty. Normally it takes between, like I say, 3 to 6 months potentially after a bounty is awarded and after the researcher requests disclosure for this to actually be disclosed. If it does get disclosed, then again, it will probably be potentially 3 to 6 months down the line. Obviously, it's not a PS5 exploit because he's only just getting a PS5 now, but it also opens up the door for potential PS5 exploits in future as well, which is great. In fact, one of the really interesting things now is that any new jailbreak that comes out for the PS4 will be coming out where the PS5 could also be vulnerable to that same jailbreak or same exploit to some degree. Because if you think about it, the 7.55 jailbreak, even though the jailbreak was disclosed after the PS5 had already come out, because it was for 7.55, that firmware came out before the PS5 launched. So that jailbreak would not affect the PS5 in any way because it would have been patched in the PS5. If it did affect the PS5, it would have been patched before the first PS5 ever even shipped. Whereas now, if a new jailbreak comes out now for the PS4, then the PS5's been out for a while. It's had a lot of firmware versions come out. So a lot of the older firmware versions for the PS5 could be vulnerable in some way, maybe not fully like a full jailbreak, but be vulnerable in some way to the same sort of exploit that gets released for the PS4, which could obviously increase the chances of us getting a PS5 jailbreak in future. So also on the PS5 front, you have this whole fault injection attack on AMD CPUs, which could be, could potentially affect the PS5 since the PS5 uses one of these new Zen AMD CPUs. So it's possible that this could potentially affect the PS5, which would be great because some kind of hardware vulnerability is going to be harder to patch, generally speaking, or maybe not even possible to patch if we're lucky for the PS5. Again, it remains to be seen whether this can be taken advantage of or not, because, we had the whole Spectre and Meltdown thing back in 2018. Those were like hardware faults with the whole CPU on Intel and AMD chips back then, but that never resulted in any kind of hardware vulnerability or hardware hack for the PS4 or the Xbox One. So whether or not this will actually result in anything remains to be seen. But it's good news. The more vulnerabilities, the more faults, vulnerabilities, or whatever that are in a given system, then the higher chance of it getting jailbroken or exploited in some way in future. So, this is all good news at the end of the day. It'll probably still be a while before we see the first PS5 jailbreak, but, this is good progress in the right direction, in my opinion. So, anyway, that's basically it. That's all I really have here for this video, just giving you guys a general update on the state of things. Again, just like anybody else, I have no inside information on when a jailbreak may come out. A lot of people seem to be stuck in this kind of mindset that because, we had the 6.72 jailbreak, then 7.02, then 7.55, only a few months from one another, that, a new jailbreak comes out every 3 to 6 months. That seems to be the mentality of some of the new people who have come into the scene recently, which is understandable. If that's all you've seen so far, then that would be your expectation. But what you have to bear in mind is that's not the trend that's been going on since the beginning of when PS4 started being jailbroken. If you look at the dates when all of these exploits were released for all the different jailbreaks across the PlayStation 4, all of these different ones right here, essentially, you had 1.76, right? The first proper, fully public jailbreak for the PS4. I mean, I came into the PS4 scene in 2016. I don't know how long 1.76 had been out by then. But it was about 2 years from when I started covering PS4 that we then got the 4.05 jailbreak. So it was 2 years plus that we had the 1.76 jailbreak before we got a new jailbreak. And then we were on 4.05 for only 2 months. 2 months on 4.05, and then suddenly we got 4.55. And then after 4.55, it was only 3 months until we got 5.05. And then we were stuck on 5.05 from about May 2018 all the way through to when 6.72 launched, which was, back sometime in 2020, I think, which was over 2 years. So we were stuck on 5.05. That was the latest jailbreak for 2 years before a new jailbreak came out. And only then, we then got the 6.72 jailbreak, which then resulted a few months later in the 7.02 jailbreak, because it was the same kernel exploit, just a new WebKit exploit came out to get basically port the jailbreak over to 7.02. And then again, it was only a couple of months after that we got 7.55. So yeah, it's only been very recently that we're in this trend where we're getting a new jailbreak every few months, mainly because of the whole HackerOne bug bounty program. But if you look at the trends going back 1.76, 2 years plus, maybe even 3 or 4, I don't know. And yeah, 5.05 was over 2 years. So just because jailbreaks have been coming out every few months recently doesn't mean that that's going to continue. So again, you just have to not update your PS4s. Too many people seem to update their PS4s. Maybe they're just thinking, there'll be a new jailbreak that'll come out in a few months, so I'll just update my PS4 to the next firmware version up so that I can play whatever game, and hopefully a new jailbreak will come out in a couple of months. Well, not necessarily. It could be years. You know, it could be a few months, sure, or it could be years. So in my opinion, if I had a PS4 that was on, 8.50 or 8.03 even at this point, and I really wanted a jailbreak, I would just sell the PS4 and try and buy one that's on a lower firmware, like 7.55 or lower, so that I could just get access to the jailbreak quicker. That's what I would do, but obviously you do you. So yeah, anyway, that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and once again, I'll see you guys in the next video.